Port Royale, a Tales of Knoxville story. Written and read by Emma Laura. This story and its characters are fictitious. Any resemblance to real persons, dead or alive, is entirely coincidental. Across the bay from Knoxville lies the mainland. A ferry transports people to and from there daily. The weekends are especially the busiest days for travel. The ferry would bring passengers from Knoxville's docks to the city of Port Royale. Miss Abby checked the time on her pocket watch. Boarding time was in a few minutes. Beatrice stood next to her with her arms crossed. "I don't see why I have to go," she grumbled. The breeze coming off the bay was chilly, so she zipped up her hoodie. "In the occasion that anything goes wrong, your job is to protect the rest of us, especially Elizabeth," said Miss Abby, closing the vintage timepiece and tucking it into her blazer's pocket. "It is of utmost importance that she maintains good relations with the rest of the familiar union." There were 4 islands off the coast of the mainland, and 6 districts total. Knoxville was not closely allied to any of its sister cities, but Miss Abby, as primary aspect and administrator of Knoxville, insisted on observing visits and maintaining order in Port Royale's House of Representatives. "I still think Knoxville should declare complete independence," said Beatrice. "All those representatives ever do is pick fights, then blame it on us. Don't forget about the gala we weren't invited to." "Oh, the gala," whispered Miss Abby, staring across the bay, her brown eyes glazed. "We don't speak of the gala." "No." "Let's speak of the gala," Beatrice snapped. "The Chancellor told you all his districts were invited, so we took the trouble of traveling to Port Royale just to learn there wasn't a chair reserved for Knoxville." "That was the past, Beatrice," Sophie said, shaking her head and wrapping her coat around Izzy, who was also shivering. "It was less than a month ago." "At least the Chancellor and First Lady gave us compensation," Sophie remarked. "Don't you like Port Royale's market?" Beatrice gripped the straps of her backpack. "I still think our allies are better than the familiar union," she grumbled. "We should nex it." Sophie picked up her tote bag as the line began to move forward. "Please, Tris, keep your mouth shut when Mount Hazel is around," she pleaded. Mount Hazel was the smallest of the 6 districts and still in development, but its representative, Miss Tess, always tried to act like it was superior to Knoxville, the first founded of the Union. "Exactly, Beatrice," said Miss Abby. "If you do not jump at any and all provocations from the other representatives, maybe they would include Knoxville for a change." "So, not being invited to the district gala is my fault? Maybe if you weren't so stuffy and boring, they would want us around. And if I'm such a liability, why bring me along? Sure, I'm supposed to be on standby in case you need protection, but who are y'all gonna have on standby if I go wrong?" Miss Abby gave Beatrice a sideways glance. "Then don't go wrong." Beatrice thought of every time she and Mount Hazel had fought. The snobby little ingrate had always begun it. Miss Tess seriously needs to learn her place, she thought. Remaining silent was difficult for her to do. If she thought something was off, by all means Beatrice is going to speak up about it. How was it her fault and none of the other representatives wanted to hear it? By some unspoken rule, everyone pleased the baby district at all costs, and doing otherwise was treated like a crime. The ferry's low horn sounded out across the dock, and the 4 aspects boarded. Beatrice hated the ferry's dull, half-hour-long ride to the mainland. She stood by the railing and watched the waves lap up the sides of the boat as Knoxville shrank behind them. Now and again, Miss Abby would check her pocket watch, fiddling with its golden chain. "The ferry is 12 minutes behind schedule," she remarked with a frown. "I don't want to be humiliated by First Lady Eleanor in front of the house again." Beatrice glanced over at the old-fashioned watch in Miss Abby's gloved hand. "Miss Tess was late last time, and old Eleanor said nothing." Miss Abby raised a perfect eyebrow and snapped the watch shut. "That is because Knoxville is held to a higher standard than Mount Hazel." This was true, but Beatrice was well aware that First Lady Eleanor's rules were arbitrary and changed constantly. Double thinking was common practice in the house, and Chancellor George was allowed it to happen. If she mentioned anything to the other representatives, even the ones she got along with, Lady Mariana of New Victoria and Governor Christoph of Hertsky, they would all tell her it was the First Lady Eleonora being herself and would encourage Knox and View to play along. "Why don't the other representatives bring their aspects?" asked Izzy, peering up at Miss Abby from under a straw hat. "Don't they have aspects too?" The child was standing on the ferry's railing, both feet on the bottom bar. She had been scanning the water for fish, but they were deep underwater. Beatrice could not help but laugh to herself, imagining Issy falling off the boat. "You'll have to ask them," Miss Abby replied, then looked at the child sternly. "If you ask, keep it discreet." Their destination grew larger as the ferry approached the port. They passed a marina with many beautiful boats sporting deep blue sails and flags with Port Royale's crest. The ferry's horn sounded again as they reached the pier, signaling for the passengers to begin disembarking. Once off the ferry and down the pier, the girls could smell fresh fish cooking at a nearby grill. There was an inn right next door to this grill, but they were to stay at the garden house. Miss Abby hailed a cab, and Beatrice helped Sophie pack the luggage into its trunk. The four of them squeezed into the back of the cab. Beatrice gazed out the window as they passed the Natural History Museum and a city park twice the size of the one in Oxenview. Many of the buildings downtown were decorated in an Azorian white and blue tile. It was a beautiful sight for Izzy, who practically climbed over Sophie just to gawk out the window. Being in the motherland made Beatrice sick. Miss Abby was on good terms with First Lady Lenora, but Beatrice could remember the control she once held over Oxenview several years before. She remembered the peace drug she had pumped into the city's water supply, the silly things that were once illegal, and the many broken deals she denied making. The Chancellor had done nothing. It was clear who really ruled Port Royale and all of its territories. Sophie said they all needed to forgive and move on. Miss Abby insisted Beatrice needed to learn how to value discipline. They were doing the best they could for the districts, and besides, Oxenview had always been the most privileged and the most favored by First Lady Eleonora. The last thing she wanted to do was lose that. One wrong move and it could be gone. However, Beatrice believed that Miss Abby and Sophie seriously needed to stop kissing up to authorities who were difficult to please. The garden house, where the Chancellor and First Lady lived, was named after the thick, lavish gardens surrounding it. After the cab passed the hedge archway, the girls could see the bright array of white, blue, purple, and red flowers. The girls were greeted in the foyer by Elizabeth, wearing her Sunday best and her representative sash. She showed the girls to their room. Sophie immediately began unpacking, eager to have her hands working on something productive. "I'll be helping out with the lunch in a bit," said Elizabeth. "Can I help?" asked Sophie as she unfolded a dress and hung it in the closet on a silver hanger. "Sure thing, it's nothing fancy. All we need to do is set some dough on the baking sheet and place it in the oven," said Elizabeth as Sophie followed her downstairs. Miss Abby ordered Izzy and Beatrice to put on their semi-formal outfits. Beatrice pulled her black and purple prom dress out of her bag, grumbling that it was overdressing. She had bought it for the gala, spending good money for nothing. "None of the other representatives in the house dress up. You and Elizabeth are the only ones being extra," she complained, making a face at Miss Abby's burgundy velvet dress. Beatrice had packed no extra shoes and kept on her combat boots. As for her hair, she pulled it into a basic ponytail, brushing it with only her fingers. Miss Abby looked up from pinning a ribbon onto Izzy's hat and wrinkled her nose at Beatrice. "If you're not going to cooperate, there is the door," she pointed at it. "Some example you're setting for Issy." Beatrice fastened the clasp of her dagger necklace and turned to leave. In the doorway, she paused. "Oh, and remember to lose the accent." Miss Abby accidentally stuck Issy with a pin as she glanced up from fixing the child's outfit. "I beg your pardon?" "You need to sound American here so you don't make Elizabeth look crazy." She crudely imitated Miss Abby's accent. "I mean, why do you even talk like that? You haven't been to London in your life." And you've only been to Texas once. What is your point, Beatrice? That at least one of us can code switch. Adios. She swaggered out of the guest room, laughing hysterically. Beatrice jogged down the stairs. On the ground floor was an enormous window, revealing rows of pepper bushes. Chili peppers of all sizes and colors hung from the branches. This is a relatively new addition to the garden house. Port Royale was going through a hot pepper craze, a trend that had not caught on in Knoxville. Beatrice was about to open one of the side doors leading into the garden when she heard a crash coming from the kitchen down the hallway, and Chancellor George screaming, "Who the hell did this?" Her pupils dilated as she saw Sophie running out of the kitchen. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know they were still in the oven," she whimpered, covering her head with her hands. The Chancellor took one of the damaged hot sauce bottles and threw it. "You are so stupid!" It did not hit Sophie. It did not land anywhere near her. But Beatrice marched over, stood in front of Sophie and Elizabeth, who was present at the scene, and said to Chancellor George, "I know I'm stupid." "Get out!" He threw another bottle. "She didn't do it." "Then who was it? A ghost?" A batch of hot pepper sauce had been left inside the oven to be warmed by the pilot light, and Sophie had somehow forgotten to check that it was empty before preheating it, so the contents were burned. "She didn't do it. Why are you storing stuff in there anyways? Why didn't this fool check the oven?" He caught another glimpse of Sophie as he took a step back into the kitchen and threw a burnt box, which had been storing bottles before it caught fire, in her direction. Beatrice pulled a tiny dagger out of her necklace, grabbed Sophie, and pointed the tip of the weapon at her neck. "Fine then. I'll punish the fool for you." She did not actually harm Sophie. She dug the tip of the dagger into Sophie's skin enough to look like she was about to finish her off like a gladiator, but not enough to draw any blood. "Throw one more thing at us, and the goody two-shoes gets it." "Oh!" the Chancellor shouted. "Take that outside, or drink this if you want to punish yourselves." He slid a hot sauce bottle across the table. Beatrice had ingested hot sauce many times as atonement before, but hot shots were contrapasso for mouthing off or lying. Not messing up a task. Striking the hand was normally the penalty for that. "So you admit you want to hurt us? Get out of here!" Beatrice let Sophie go and stomped out of the kitchen, throwing the hot sauce bottle along with other random objects in her path to the floor on her way out. Elizabeth and Sophie followed her into the guest room. Both were shocked and appalled by the way she had handled the situation. "Why did you lie for me?" Sophie asked as the two practically chased Beatrice up the stairs. "It's obvious it was I who failed to check the oven. I can pay for everything. Because I thought the Chancellor was going to hit the crap out of you, Soph," Beatrice replied. "That's usually what follows getting screamed at." Sophie and Elizabeth exchanged confused glances as Beatrice slammed the door of the room behind them and shouted, "I hate it here!" She did not care who heard. "I want to leave already!" "Beatrice, we just got here," said Sophie. "And it's like this whole damn place is set up to make us look crazy!" Elizabeth shook her head. "Most of it's your reaction, Triz. Threatening Sophie? What the heck were you thinking?" "It was a fake out. I wasn't actually gonna do it." "That was still manipulative and wrong," Elizabeth insisted. "Not to mention embarrassing. What if this ruins reputation with the Chancellor and First Lady?" "Did you see all those bottles on the shelves in there?" Beatrice scoffed. "What is one ruined batch?" A minute later, Miss Abby walked into the room, followed by Izzy, who had a tiny ginger kitten perched on top of her hat. "I thought Miss First Lady Lenore despised cats. Now she's happily taking care of her entire litter. I wish you could make an opinion and stick with it," Miss Abby lamented, picking the kitten up off Izzy's hat and stroking the top of its fuzzy head. She exchanged glances with the others in the room. "Whatever happened?" Elizabeth pointed at Beatrice. "Bobo tried to cut Sophie's throat." "You did what?" Miss Abby dropped the kitten into Izzy's hands and marched across the room towards Beatrice. "I was pretending. Sophie, tell her I didn't hurt you at all." Miss Abby pinched the bridge of her nose. Why, Beatrice? Because I thought the Chancellor was gonna hit Sophie. I'm not allowed to fight him, so this was the next best thing. That makes absolutely no sense. Yeah, it does. Nobody moves or Sophie gets it, then he'd have to stop. The Chancellor wouldn't do that, and besides, said Elizabeth, we're too old to get hit. Age don't matter in the blind range, said Beatrice, crossing her arms. I should know. And besides, doesn't it feel wrong to screw up and then not get hit? Miss Abby pulled a stool out from under the vanity set and took a seat, burying her face in her pale hands. You don't protect Sophie by threatening to harm her. Beatrice pulled her dress off and dropped it onto the carpeted floor. She did not care if anyone was around to see, as she pulled her black hoodie back on. Miss Abby covered both Issy's and the kitten's eyes as she did this. I hate this place, and I want to go back to Knoxville. Let me go. No! Abby stood back up as Beatrice turned as if to leave. No one is to leave this room. Not even Elizabeth. But the luncheon is about to start, she said. Say you're on a hunger strike, said Miss Abby. It won't surprise me. It won't surprise them, and they won't miss you anyways. She walked around the room, closing the drapes. As for you, Beatrice, you are to shadow Elizabeth until you learn how to appear normal. Elizabeth sat down to write a note to Agent Viola, their caseworker, never losing the expression of embarrassment. Listen, Abby, you told me to protect Elizabeth and everybody else, but once I do that, you get upset. Agent Viola gave us tools. We now have alternatives to your default actions. There is no reason to use violence outside of self-defense anymore. There was no immediate danger, only perceived danger by the sound of it, Beatrice. It's pronounced Beatrice. Now, the Chancellor thinks I am both stupid and a psycho, muttered Elizabeth, dropping her fountain pen onto the desk before sending the note into the mailing slot. You must understand, Beatrice, that the Chancellor and First Lady are the only ones in the familiar union we actually are on good terms with and receive benefits from. Ruin that, and we are on our own. Good! Shouted Beatrice, loud enough for anyone on the floor to hear. I'd rather be on our own, 'cause I hate it here! Elizabeth decided to use the hunger strike cover because she did not want to risk chaos if she was followed downstairs by a still fuming Beatrice. Beatrice did not want to be anywhere around the Chancellor after what happened. Everyone knew that in her current state she was a minefield. A whooshing sound came from the message portal. Elizabeth hurried to the tiny portal, opened the capsule, and saw that it was a reply from Agent Viola. Library now, it read, followed by a list of instructions. Elizabeth and the others walked single file to the garden house's library. It had some of the same books that were in the mansion at Knoxville in their cabin. It was larger than either. There were 3 levels and the walls were painted gold and white. Each pulled a book out from the Port Royale history section, which was on the ground level across from the reference shelf. Elizabeth opened hers first. It was about fishing, which was and is a major part of the city. A holographic projection shone from the book's digital chip, displaying pictures of children standing on one of the docks holding fishing poles. Elizabeth stood without reacting, her arms crossed. Miss Abby finally found the chapter she had been looking for. The Chancellor's rare but intense wars. A more accurate term may be skirmish.